Welcome to the Generous Business Owner Podcast, where business owners gain inspiration and encouragement to live a legacy, not just leave one. And now your hosts, Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's Generous Business Owner Podcast. My name is Jeff Thomas, and we have a very special guest with us this week, my friend Niko Lorentzatos. Niko, say hello to everybody. Thanks for being with us.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Niko is a halftime coach here in Houston, and he climbed the corporate ladder, in all kinds of fast-growing energy companies in Texas, and I'm sure he's got a lot of war stories from that. Obviously, a very cyclical business, and I'm sure you saw some big ups and downs. But Niko, we'll get into that in a minute. We always like to kind of start out by just kind of learning about, your family growing up. Where'd you grow up? What was your family like? That kind of thing. Set the stage for us.
Sure. Happy to. I am one of the very proud native Houstonians, born and raised here. Got here through a circuitous route. My parents were both Greek immigrants both from the island of Kefalonia in Greece, and so it's as beautiful as what you're picturing in your mind.
I'm picturing beautiful water and white buildings on some sort of hills.
Yeah.
How am I doing?
Yeah, you're great. Where we're from is a little more green, but the water is just gorgeous. Food's great. People are great.
Yeah.
And still have a lot of family there. So yeah, born and raised in Houston, Texas. I've been a member of the Annunciation Greek Orthodox Cathedral my entire life. I was baptized in that church, married there. My kids were baptized there. I serve on the parish council right now. It's been a big part of my life.
Yeah. And there's a good community there. I mean, we've talked about that, right? I mean, some of my favorite people are members of your church. So that's really, it's an awesome community. You guys have the Greek festival. The food's amazing. You share once a year all the festivities. So thank you for that.
We do. Absolutely. Yeah. It's a wonderful community. Blessed to be a part of it.
Yeah. So you grow up, how many siblings did you have? Or do you
I have an older brother named Evan who he went into the family business, which was full service car washes. For a couple of decades, 3, 4, whatever decades it was Regency Car Wash spread out all over Harris County and Fort Bend County. And, in traditional immigrant family culture, my older brother went into the family business and I went to law school.
And what kind of drew you to that? What was the idea originally for law school?
I was an argumentative, stubborn kid, and I was always told I would end up being a lawyer. And as far as I can remember, the only two things I ever wanted to be were a professional musician and a lawyer. And so I played, as you can see by the background, music's been a big part of my life. I did that all through college, and much to my parents' disappointment, after college for a period of time. And this is back when I had hair, and thought I was going to go down that path, and then kind of woke up one morning and felt the world passing me by, and went to the other thing that was calling me, which is practicing law. So I got a haircut, moved back to Houston, went to law school, and got the job I always wanted at a really, really great firm downtown. It was then called Bracewell and Patterson. This is in the mid '90s, and that started that part of the journey.
And so, yeah, you, as one would do in Houston, I mean, we like to talk in Houston that it's a diversified economy, but the reality is healthcare and energy dominate. So you,
Yeah.
you were probably going to end up in one of those industries at some point, or someplace that supported them. So
Yeah.
you talk about that path maybe a little bit.
That's super diverse. We've got oil and gas. And so,
Yeah, exactly.
I actually didn't do a ton of that kind of work at Bracewell. I was in the trial section, but I did. It came up kind of towards the end, and then I was really, really blessed to get the job that I wanted. I was in a group where I got to go to trial very early. I got a lot of responsibilities. I got to do the things that I wanted to do. What I realized was it was great and I loved the challenge, but I actually didn't want to do those things the rest of my career. So about 3, 4 years into it, I started getting restless, and I had an opportunity to go in-house with Burlington Resources. And I thought, okay, well, that's that could be kind of interesting. At the time, all my friends were going to .coms and
Oh, right. Late 90s. Sure,
yeah,
sure.
late 90s. So it was going to be everything was going to be online, and nobody was going into these old economy jobs. And I thought, well, I looked at it, and it actually seemed really interesting to me. Um, and one thing led to another. I took the job, and it's one of the best things that ever happened to me in terms of matching matching my skill set and my personality with the job. Right. It was the parts of practicing law that I really liked, and the parts of business that I grew up within a family business. I loved it.
Yeah. So why was that different from being at a law firm?
A lot of folks, when they're at a law firm and they look at going in-house, one of the things that turns them off is that you're right there in an office next door to the client. There's no getting away from the client, right? And that you only have one client. Well, that's the part I loved.
Okay.
My background was in litigation. And so at the law firm, most of the time, you get a case, you get a matter where people are already mad at each other and things have blown up. When you're in-house, the business guy comes in and says, "Hey, things are starting to go sideways. Nobody's gotten sued yet, but help me figure this out." And so it allowed me, I think, to be more of a counselor and to draw on some business sense to maybe find resolutions so that we could move the business forward. And that really, really appealed to me.
Never heard anybody explain that before since I'm not in that world. I think that's a really good description of, maybe being a little proactive and getting ahead of things. And also this idea of sort of investing in these relationships, to have one client. I hadn't really, I mean, it's kind of obvious, but I just hadn't thought about the benefits of that, right? You build deeper relationships and do all kinds of. So what's the kind of stuff that would hit your desk as a corporate attorney or a general counsel?
Well, as a, early days corporate attorney, it was a lot of little skirmishes and disputes and, trying to figure out, help everybody kind of understand the value of finding a business resolution rather than, getting
Litigation,
upset with each
right?
other. And then, over the years, I was blessed with opportunities to get to do stuff outside of litigation. I branched into HR type of work, and I really enjoy the people side of it. And then by the end, when I was general counsel at Oasis, I had a number of other groups that I worked very closely with that reported to me. There was HR, there was IT. For a while, I had, environmental safety and health and regulatory and ESG and all this other stuff. And what I know about myself is I love variety. I love challenges. I like the accomplishment of doing new, difficult, hard things. Um, and so I felt that I was never gonna, I was never drawn to being a CFO or the CEO or anything like that. That's not how I felt I could impact a business, but I did feel like I could bring some value to these other areas. So the things that would hit my desk were, it wasn't directly balance sheet related, like, the CFO.
Right.
It wasn't directly, the operations, but it was ways to help propel those parts of the business forward.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah, I use a baseball analogy. I felt a little bit like a utility infielder. I brought a lot of different, gloves to the field every day, and I really
And
enjoyed.
what your friends did your friends ever joke that they should just buy whatever stock in every company you went to? Because I think didn't they? It feels like they all got bought out when I was looking through where you. Is that
Uh,
the case? Did they all get bought out?
yeah, the last one, Oasis, technically was an actual merger of equals. That
Okay.
beautiful unicorn that we talk about in public transactions. But this really was. We took Oasis and Whiting, and we split the management teams and mashed them together, and did the same with the boards and chose a new name. So. Um, yeah, but the other ones got bought out. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so you've had that experience too. What was that like when these acquisitions were made? Because we've got a lot of people that listen to this that have probably been through some of these transactions, maybe not as a public company, but as a private company.
Yeah.
What did you learn from those kind of transactions? And I'm sure you were in the middle of those because those are such legal,
Oh yeah.
uh, you know, negotiations.
Sure. My first experience was, I left Bracewell to go to Burlington Resources. And, when I got to Burlington, I had no concept of any of this. And I woke up one morning, I was up super early. I think one of the kids who are now adults, we were up early with him or her. and we had the news on, and I saw a little crawler that Burlington Resources was being acquired by ConocoPhillips for $36.5 billion. And I thought, prior to that, it had never really crossed my mind. I thought, we're too big. Who would ever do that? And I just had no concept of how M&A worked. And so what I learned is that in between an announcement like that and closing, not much work gets done. People basically spend all their time trying to figure out what does this mean for me? What does this mean for me? And by the way, what does this mean for me? And that's human nature. And that's okay.
Yeah. 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 As we always say, when people come to us when they're selling their companies, they're also kind of like, even for those people who own the company, they're like, now what? I mean, that's what all the employees are thinking too, right?
Sure, sure. And I can tell you is on the executive side, I think what a lot of people don't realize is how common it is to have discussions about acquisitions and mergers in the background. It
Yeah.
seems there's discussions and pitches from bankers all the time, and everybody's doing their job just to kick tires and see if things fit. And always in the back of your mind, you're thinking about, okay, if this thing played out, what would it mean for people? And, ideally, it means jobs. But the next best thing, if you can't secure positions for everybody, is to make sure they're as well taken care of as possible so that they don't suffer too much hardship.
Having a transition plan. Okay,
Yeah.
so while your career is blowing and going, what's happening in the background? When did you get married? How many kids? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Got married in 2000 to Jenny. We're coming up on our 25th anniversary this summer.
Congratulations.
Like many folks in our position, thank God, I married way above my grade, and I'm very thankful for that. Married to my best friend. We have a son, we have a daughter. Our son Luke is 22. He is a consultant in the Northern Virginia area, and our daughter Rebecca is a sophomore at Boston University. Both of them are math and computer science majors. So running as far away from their dad's politics and law degrees as they possibly can. But they're both quantitative kids and they love it, and they have passions for it. So I'm very thankful for that.
And talk about maybe you talked about kind of the being part of the Greek community and the Orthodox church there growing up. So faith was always part of it. What did that look like for you as an adult and as a father and during your career?
Yeah, yeah. So um, faith has always been a part of my life. When you're born into the Greek community, it's all around you. It's indistinguishable from the culture, right? The way I would describe my progression here is from, 0 to 20 years old. I was probably a reluctant Christian, having to get up on Sunday to go to church and, driving from outside to the Loop to go into the Montrose area felt like it was 10 hours. It was really 20 minutes, putting on itchy clothes that didn't quite fit right. Um, so there's that. From 20 to 30, I'd say, I was so focused on myself and career. I didn't pay a lot of attention to faith. If you had asked me at the time, I would have fought you to the death that I'm a, Greek Orthodox, but I really wasn't practicing it. And then got married around 30 or 31. And that's, I think, when I really started to take it more seriously. And from 30 to 40, early years of marriage, early years of kids, um, I think I did a decent job of leading us through the motions, but I wouldn't say that it was a joyful thing. It felt a lot like another thing that you do during the week. Um, I look back and I think, well, Sunday morning driving to church should have been a celebration, and it was anything but that. It was, cranky kids feeling the way I did when I was 0 to 20. I was not at my best. I was probably still exhausted from the week, probably working from a deficit. I was definitely not working from a surplus, and so we did it. And then I'd say from 40 to 50, a little bit more time continued to grow. But I tell people all the time, this halftime period of my life, I probably learned more about orthodoxy and my own faith in my 50s than I did in the previous 50 years. And
Yeah.
I still have a long ways to go.
So what was the maybe well, we talked about you being a halftime coach. When did you read that book?
Yeah, so I got to Oasis Petroleum in the fall of 2010, and the company had gone public a couple of months before that. So I went as their first general counsel. And I think it was me and one other officer had joined after the IPO. So there was a group of capital partners who had been there for a couple of years. And they had kicked in their own money along with money from NCAP and, gone through the ups and downs of the startup. And then in a very, very challenging market in June of 2010, they had what was at the time the most successful IPO in the United States. And it was up and to the right. And so I got there in the fall, and not long after that, um, a lot of their capital partners, a lot of their stock became unrestricted. And so I looked around and I saw here's some people that are, I don't know, 50, 55, whatever, who had achieved really, they had achieved significant wealth. And it got me wondering, wait a minute, isn't this why we work? Right? Okay, you've hit this milestone. Now what? So what do you do? And I've always been fascinated just with the basic question of why. And so I started talking to these guys and I love one-on-one conversations, no surprise. And fortunately, one of them, Roy Mace, just a great guy and a believer, said, "You need to read Halftime." So I
Oh.
think maybe give me a copy of it, or I got it. I read it. I was 40, 41 years old at the time. It was so impactful that I put it back up on the shelf and I got back to work for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
It wasn't the right time for
Yeah,
me,
one right time. Yeah, yeah.
but it came up again for me more than a decade later, and it hit me like a lightning bolt. But that was my first exposure to it.
And what was the catalyst the second time it kind of came up? What made you dust it off?
Yeah, so the decade of my 40s was, from a work perspective, was everything I ever dreamed of. Everybody's motivated by something. Mine is challenge and accomplishment. I like the compensation piece of it too. Everybody does, but that wasn't the leading thing. But I'd gone to Oasis. It was the answer to a dream because I wanted to help being part of building a company. And I got there and we had, I think, fewer than 50 employees. And at the height, we had, seven or 800. And, we continued to build and build this thing and create a culture that was the kind of company that I would be proud to have any of our children work there,
Right.
right? It was that kind of place with some really solid Christian values running throughout the DNA. Well, going towards, if you remember, I'm sure you do, 2014, 2015, oil and gas prices started to go the wrong way. And from the period of 2015 to 2018, 2019, things are starting to look very dire. Companies like Oasis, smaller mid-cap companies, were fueled by cheap debt, right? What we used to call junk bonds, what we today call high yield debt. And we were pretty conservative about that. But a lot of our investors were like, you guys need to take on more debt. And then Black Friday happened, and the oil prices, bottomed out. They fell out, and all of a sudden, everybody woke up and said, "Why do you companies have so much debt?" So
Exactly.
the goalpost kind of moved during the middle of the game, and the backdrop here was around 2019 or so. I don't have the dates perfect, but we started looking, we had a very small team that started looking at, hey, we might need to put this thing into bankruptcy. If we're going to save it and do what's right, we should probably explore that. So going into 2020, that's what's happening. And the spoiler alert, we were in and out of a prepackaged bankruptcy that we negotiated with our bondholders, and the company came out in November 2020 and new equity, and it was up and to the right and very successful. But it was a very, very painful period. So during that time, a couple of things were happening in my personal life. Um, 2019, I lost my father. He had been very, very ill for a while. He had Parkinson's, and we had watched, and he was in his mid to late 80s at the time. So it was a slow decline. It was very painful for us as a family. There were a lot of blessings that came out of it. It brought my brother and me and our wives even closer than we were before because we were all here nearby and able to really help out. But while his passing was a blessing in some senses, it's also losing your father. So this
Yeah.
this happens, and as we lose my dad, my mother, who's in her 70s, much younger, well, she gets cancer, and we get her into remission, and then unfortunately she got sick again, and so a year later she passes away. Mom passes away in the summer of 2020, right in the middle of COVID, and we're in the middle of bankruptcy. And we're also preparing to send our oldest off to, college, which anybody who's ever sent a child off to another state for school knows that's like somebody's, stepping on your oxygen cable.
Yeah.
And we sent him off to school, and it was, well, you're not going to see him again until Thanksgiving. So anyway, there was just a lot going on, and we got out of the bankruptcy in November 2020, and I remember thinking, man, I don't have an ounce of gas left in this tank, but we did it. And the crude analogy that I use with people is you feel like you've run this marathon and you finished it. And somebody hands you, a bathing suit, a bike, and says, by the way, it's triathlon. And I was like,
Right.
I didn't save any energy for that. And so it was what followed that next year after bankruptcy, we went on a tear of we probably did more transactions in a year and a half than I did in the preceding entire career. And it was an all-out sprint. And I just remember something that period of 2019 to 2022. I'm sorry, we got out of the bankruptcy in 22. I may have said 2019 to 2022. Um, no, I take that back. We got out in 2020, my bad. But during this period of the bankruptcy and then the year and a year and a half after that, um, I was at the time thinking this is the worst burnout I've ever had. I wasn't sleeping. I was physically not doing well. I think I was depressed. I wasn't really, I mean, I was just kind of limping through my days. I was definitely not at my best. I was questioning my judgment. I was not myself. Like, to the extent I ever thought I had superpowers, it's like somebody handed me a big old boulder made out of kryptonite. And so I remember I would sit at my breakfast table at 2 or 3 in the morning with, a big cup of really strong coffee that I'm sure wasn't helping my sleep issues. And I would try to process my thoughts by writing it out. And I learned years later that I was journaling. I didn't even know that. I'd read the Bible, I just read books, I'd write things out. But there was a consistent theme in this period, which was, God, I can't do this anymore. I'm I'm stuck, right? Like I can't do this anymore, but I can't quit. I have personally stood up in front of hundreds of people at this company for years and said, trust me, I've recruited people to come to this company. Now, when the going's tough and I'm going through a hard time, it just didn't feel right to say, well, I'm out. And on top of that, I didn't feel like I was in a position to, you know, not earn a living. I also didn't think there were other options. It was really, I was part of a management team that took a company through bankruptcy. I didn't check the same boxes that people wanted in a general counsel at the time. And I thought, man, I don't know what to do. So my prayer every day was, okay, God, I'm stuck. Just tell me where you want me to do, where to be, what you want me to do, and just give me the strength to do it. And I'm in. This is over and over and over again. So this is a very long answer, but thanks for bearing with me. So fast forward to 2022, the company's on very solid footing, doing extremely well. And we're about to enter into this deal to merge Oasis with Whiting and double the size of the company and achieve scale on a bunch of goals. And I knew that there would be a shuffling of the management teams. Not all of us would survive. And I thought, I took I took a hard look at things and I thought, I've actually done everything that I came here to do. I think I'm going to listen to this nudge and I'm going to be okay if I'm not on the traveling team. And so I let that be known and it worked out that way. And so when the deal closed, um, I got to leave. But in between announcing the deal and the deal closing, there was me and one other guy who were leaving the company. The other guy was Taylor Reed, who was the founder, president, and COO of the company. And he and I would work every day on the transition to integrate the two companies. And then in the afternoons, I'd be in his office or he'd be in mine. And it was, well, what are you going to do when this is over?
Right.
Start a company, we're going to go get some money. What are we doing? And he walked
Right.
in one day and said out of nowhere, hey, I'm doing this halftime program. To which I said, wait, they have programs? I didn't even know he had read halftime. And he said, yeah, they've got it's group work and they do coaching and all that. I went home, I looked it up. I think I signed up for it the next day. So that answered for me, what are you going to do on day one of not being at Oasis? Well, I said, I'm going to do halftime. And so I entered the halftime fellows program, and that put me into this world of taking a minute, thinking about my calling in life and what God's purpose is in my life. And And God gave me answers, I'll tell you that much. This notion of coaching came up early and often. And despite my prayer, Jeff, of hey, just tell me what you want me to do and give me the strength to do it. He did all that. And I, of course, resisted for a very long time because I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm not going to be a coach. That's not me at all. So
What is it about that you struggled with, that word coach?
yeah, I think I had some misconceptions. One, for some reason I had in my head that being a coach meant being a salesman. And
Uh,
I didn't want to do that. The deeper explanation there is I treasure, I welcome, I value one-on-one conversations.
yeah.
I'm always I'm terrible at small talk, but if you want to sit here and talk about life, I'm in all day. And the very thought that somebody who might otherwise want to come talk to me about something might be put off from doing that because they thought that I might try to sell them something, I couldn't live with that. And over time, what I realized is it doesn't have to be that way. You can't sell coaching to somebody. Coaching only works if somebody realizes they have a gap between where they are and where they want to be, and they have a burning desire to do something about it. I can help you identify a gap, but I cannot create the desire for you to want to do something about it. So I switched from thinking of it as selling to just letting people know what I do, and then I put it in God's hands.
Yeah, so it becomes kind of a pull, not a push. Like, hey, here's what I'm doing. If that's pulling you, let's talk.
Yeah,
But if it's,
yeah.
I love that position. And what was it about going through uh, the fellows program that you enjoyed? What do you think the primary benefits of that were for you?
I was in a group with seven other people that I had never met from all over the country, and one of them was from South Korea in different walks of life. There were a few of them were independently wealthy, a few of them were still very much in the game, but everybody was interested in the conversation of why. You know, what's the bigger purpose here? What am I here for? And I remember about 2 or 3 hours into this thing, we're going around the room and we're talking, and I had this realization of these people are going to be in my life on some level forever. And
Mm,
I told Jenny after this launch weekend we did, I said, remember these names because you're going to hear them again. They're going to be with us for a while, and not every day, but um, but certainly, even after a few months, I could pick up the phone with any one of them and say, I've got this thing, I need some help working through it, and they'd be there and they'd do that for me. It's awesome.
yeah. And did they kind of help point you toward that coaching place?
They
Did they
did.
kind of confirm that? I mean, how did that play out about kind of what you thought you might want to do?
Yeah.
Maybe, how was God guiding and how were they confirming or however you went through that?
Yeah. So yes, the punchline on that is yes. The beauty of how halftime structures this is, there's a lot of group work where everybody's answering questions. They'll say, hey, talk about your passions, your purpose, or whatever. You go off and you write things down, and then you come back and you report it out to the group. So there's this repetitive, iterative nature of the work.
Yeah.
People learn about you, and then they're able to then connect dots for you,
Right.
right? They see things in you that you don't see in yourself, or you've got,
Yes.
your inner critic is not letting you see these things. Well, they don't have an agenda other than to help you and reflect. So, halftime you get one-on-one coaching, and that's great, and it's really powerful. But if you're in a group with seven other people, then you have these seven other people who are pouring into you and coaching too. And so, yeah, this notion of coaching, I mean, I landed on it. My mission statement is to help leaders move from where they are to where God wants them to be. And that's a statement that I read in a coaching book. And that was 9 months after I started halftime. So from the time I started to seeing those words on the page, there was this notion of helping people somehow. Okay, well, am I going to help lawyers, or who am I going to help? How am I going to help them? Am I going to go be a general counsel again and just run the business a different way? So there's a lot of iteration that went on.
Yeah, makes sense.
Throughout it all, yeah, my cohort was very much supportive and encouraging, and they asked a lot of questions too.
And just since we know each other, I know you have a passion for kind of younger business leaders. That's not always the case. Where did that draw come from?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And you and I both know, so the halftime ministry, what I call your father's halftime or vintage halftime, is awesome. And it caters a lot to people moving from success to significance,
Yeah.
right? A lot of times there's somebody who's had a liquidity event
Yeah.
and they don't feel called to the golf course. They're like, look, I got good years left. I want to impact the kingdom. And I think that is extremely important because if you can activate that group of people, right on. But then I also think about how do we apply this to people a decade sooner or even a decade before that? Let's go upstream. And sometimes I feel like I'm coaching my 40-year-old self,
Yeah. Right.
right? And I don't say this from a place of regret because no matter what I feel like I got right and all the things I got wrong, I wouldn't trade any of it, right? It's all been, while painful, a gift.
Right.
And what I wonder though is, I have this feeling that like my 40-year-old self, I was living out my version of a script, which was, kind of the immigrant son script, right? Like your job is to go succeed. Your job is to be a provider. And if you nail that, right? If you over-index that and you nail that, everything else is going to take care of itself. If you would have asked me, like, what are the things that I'm going to care about on my deathbed? It would be my family, it would be my faith, my community, my health, and of course, my career. But I look back and I thought, yeah, and the way to get all that is to put every single thing I have, all my capacity and emotional bandwidth into succeeding in my job, right? And yet I expected success on all these other fronts without putting that same kind of intentionality into it, which is insane. And don't get me wrong. I think if my kids and my wife were here, they would tell you I've been a good husband and a good dad, and I coached Little League, and you know, I was a Cub Scout den leader. I did all these things. Um, but I tell people I work plenty hard, but other people work more hours than me. But nobody on the planet ever outworried me, ever. And when all you do is worry about, that problem at work or whatever, even when you're home, you're not fully present. And so that's what I did is I think I sacrificed some presence that I think I wish I could have found a way maybe not to. And what my hope is if I'm talking to 40-year-old me or 30-year-old, whatever, that maybe something I say leads to a thought that he or she will have, and they say, okay, well, yeah, what if I do it a different way instead?
So how do you get there with these younger people, right? I mean, I think you did a really good job of describing. I mean, it resonated with me about, your 20s, you're just trying to, find the job you want and working your butt off. 30s, okay, the family's maybe there and growing, but you're still trying to get to the next level. And you know what I mean? It's like there's this sort of general, how do you, what questions are you asking these younger guys to kind of get them thinking about this stuff, you know? How do you
Yeah,
break that cycle?
step one is to talk about it out loud. Most of us, um, if you're blessed with a best friend or a spouse or both, you probably had some version of this conversation with that person, and the conversation has gotten to a point where it's, well, I just want you to be happy. Well, of course you do, and it's wonderful. And I'm not trying to minimize that. What I try to do in coaching is just, really live in the moment and just ask questions. And it could be as simple as, you know, okay, your head and the heart is a really big deal in halftime, right? Like your head is telling you this, but your heart feels something here. And sometimes the heart is this nudge or something's not quite right, or I feel pulled. So we explore that a little bit. Like let's talk about the nudge a little bit. Like when you think about your life, what are the parts that you want more of? What are the parts you want less of? Right? There's a bunch of different exercises. I try to get people kind of talking. Step one is saying things out loud. Sometimes you hear yourself say something and you hear it differently than when you're playing that tape in your head, right? And then that leads somewhere else, and then you get some awareness and realizations. Um, Another exercise, you've probably seen it, I'm sure you've seen it, is, we talk about like, okay, if life turned out perfectly, how would you know? What would that look like? What would the elements be? And then, it starts with the job, and then you work, well, I want to be around my family. I want to do this. I want to do that. Okay, well, how are you living your life today?
Right. How does your calendar and your mind share match up with like what you were saying earlier, right? If you're these are your objectives,
Yeah.
is the plan matching, right?
Yeah. And just the awareness of that is pretty terrifying because none of us is living,
No, 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 no.
we're not living like eternity starts tomorrow. And a lot of us are living with the look, there's two things I hear a lot. Yeah, if I can just get past these next 3 weeks, good.
Right.
And my spouse is so supportive. She knows what she signed up for. I'm like, does she? Does he? You know, maybe signed up for the next 3 weeks, but what about the next 30 years? Let's have it, let's talk about these things. A lot of these conversations start out with, "Hey, Nico, will you talk to, my nephew? You know him from church. He's trying to find a job or he's unhappy at the firm or whatever." And so we sit down and we have a conversation about work. In the unspoken belief is, man, if I can just fix the job thing, I'm going to be happier than I am right now. It's okay. Well, let's talk about the job thing. Where would you like to be in 5 years or 10 years? But okay, if you do that, what's the rest of your life look like? Oh, it's great. I go, how's your marriage? Fantastic. What about your kids? They're 5 years old now. In 10 years, you're gonna be 15 years old. How's life with teenagers? Oh, good. What are you planning on doing between now and then with your wife to make sure that marriage is good? And what are we thinking about doing with the kids to make sure they still want to be around you and talk to you when they're 15, right? And I don't have the answer, believe me, and I don't cross-examine quite that hard. I try to be a little bit nicer about it, but I just want people
Well,
to
and,
think.
and they're also in a group. So just like you had that group with the fellows program, I mean, you're running a kind of a small group, right? How many people are usually in that group?
Yeah, so we started Halftime Houston, right, to take really similar programming. Instead of 12 months, we do it in 6, and we do it in person, in community here in Houston. We actually do it at my house. And the
Yeah, yeah.
thought there being, there's a lot of people who I think would love to do this in Houston. And even if they don't know each other coming in, they know each other coming out. So you can build
Yeah.
some community. So the first group that started in September just wrapped up with 7. And then the second cohort, there's 6, and they're two-thirds of the way through. And
Have you
so
seen that same kind of building into each other that you saw in the fellows program with that group?
I have, and the other thing I've seen, I've definitely seen the connective tissue.
Yeah, yeah,
And my diabolical plan here is I'm going to get both groups together in a
yeah.
mashup and have them have dinner over here. But the other thing that we're doing is, so I've prayed on, okay, God, I've got this idea. If there are people that should be in this group, put them before me, and it's happened. And in both groups, you have what I would call traditional half-timers, 2 or 3 people who are looking to retire.
Yep.
But then we've also got this beautiful collection, like in my cohort, of people still in it. But
Hmm.
in each cohort, I've also had an early 30-something-year-old and somebody that's in the not traditional corporate space, like either nonprofit or mental health counseling or something. And what I think is fascinating is you might say, well, what can the 30-year-old possibly have to offer here? Or how,
Yeah.
the 60-year-old, that's way too much. What I see is them pouring into each other.
Oh,
The
so
30-year-old
cool.
is benefiting from the wisdom and mistakes of the 60-year-old, but the 60-year-old is benefiting from the 30-year-old saying, man, I wish somebody would talk to me like that.
Mm,
And it's beautiful.
mm. Man, it's kind of the way it's supposed to be. Well,
Amen.
Nico, man, the time's flying by. This is so fun, man. You are good at one-on-one conversations because we're having one right now, and we're just letting our friends listen. But I'm all drawn in. Every time we talk, it's like this for me. It's like the clock
Amen.
just speeds up. So you're definitely in the right space. So Nico, as you know, man, we always just try to leave a kind of a practical tip. Maybe whatever comes to mind. What probably for one of these guys that shows up and you just maybe they got their head down, they're running a business, starting to go okay, and they're pulling their head up, and maybe
Yeah.
they're having a little pull to do, something's missing. What's just a practical next step that you could share with us?
Yeah, I always tell people to do this exercise. Our good friend Lloyd Reed, co-founder of the Halftime Institute, came up with it. And it's take a piece of paper. Let's see, just take a piece of paper,
Yeah.
fold it in half, right? And then column heading here. And on this side, write valuable. And take 20 minutes and write down all the things in your life that are valuable. And when you're done with that exhaustive list, go to the other side, column heading there, and write priceless.
Mm.
And then list out what's priceless in your life. And, and just think about it. And look at the difference between those two lists. Talk about it with your spouse or your best friend or somebody who knows you and loves you well, right? And then think about, if you want to, look at your calendar from last week. And there's going to be stark differences between the priceless things in your life and how each of us spends our days. Because I don't know about you, everybody would say dinner with my family is the most priceless thing in my day. None of us calendar dinner with our family.
Right.
But what if we did? What if we built in time to wrap up at the office and had some prep time for dinner with our family, to close out the day, get in the headspace that we need to be in, leave it at the office and actually save some for home, right? And treat that beautiful time with all the intention that you treated all the meetings in your business day with. Try it once. And again, I say this like I do this all the time. I don't. I get it wrong too, and the day gets away from me. But start with that and see how it feels.
Yeah, I mean, I think and you can start in miniature, right? I mean, just start doing a couple things, maybe schedule a couple of things and move in the right direction. Build the momentum, right?
Absolutely.
Love that idea.
Yeah.
Take inventory, a little bit of inventory,
Yep.
Well, Niko, this has been so much fun, man. I can't thank you enough for joining us.
Oh, the pleasure's all mine, man. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I always love talking to you, man.
It's fun, and thanks everybody for joining and listening. And share this with a friend, subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Generous Business Owner Podcast with Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt. Make sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can find the guest contact information in the show notes. Stay tuned for the next episode.